In Genesis 15, details of the Abrahamic covenant. And it's important to remember God keeps his covenants forever. So it's important to know what he promised. In verse 18 of Genesis 15, it says, "On that day, Yahweh entered into covenant with Abram. And he says, I have given this land to your descendants from the Egyptian border to the great river Euphrates." Sadly, in our streets, we hear people shouting about a river. And that's the river Euphrates. And the sea is the Mediterranean, which, by the way, is one of my favourites to swim in. But the river to the sea is God's covenant to Israel. And Numbers 34 details the borders of that land allocated to Israel and to each tribe. Whose land does it belong to? Well, my guest today is an award-winning film producer who's made 2 documentaries called Whose Land? Hugh Kitson has worked in the film and television industry for 45 years as a documentary filmmaker and involved in over 200 productions as an editor, director, writer and a producer, and won many 20 international awards. For locals, you'll know the television series The Flying Doctor, and Hugh was involved as the assistant producer. I think that's correct. He's the founder of the Hatikva Film Trust, which advances biblical prophecy through films, and his documentaries about Israel span over 4 decades. Hugh, it's such a privilege to have you here with us in Bendigo. Welcome to the Tabernacle of David and 105.1.
Thank you very much, Ruth, and it's a real pleasure to be here in Bendigo with you. And it's a privilege to have shared what we've shared this weekend in praise and worship before the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob.
Yes, it's been wonderful. So there's so many things we could do, many programs, but and so much happening in the news. And we'll get to the documentaries in a minute, but just for a brief moment, and I know there's a big story, but you can just give us a little insight. How did you get into film and television? And how did the Lord draw you into Israel to document her story?
Right.
And it's 2 big questions.
Well, it is. Well, I'll be brief with both of them. I trained in film at the Polytechnic Film School in London. They had a film school in those days. And I graduated in 1969. And I couldn't get a job in the film industry in the UK. So I was a £10 POM in 1970 to Perth in Western Australia. And I have to say it's the best 10 quid's worth I've ever had in my life.
Well, I'm glad you came to our land.
But to answer the second question, not long after I arrived, I was going to Yokine Baptist Church, and the West Australian director of David House Fellowship, which is based in Melbourne actually, he was showing a film called His Land.
The Billy Graham one?
Yes, the Billy Graham one. Yeah. And this is 1970. I'd been a committed Christian, a real believer for about a year and a half at that stage. And this film called His Land, which featured both Cliff Richard and Cliff Barrows.
Yes.
And it's like a musical documentary
Remember
through the land of Israel.
Wonderful.
It was. And all of a sudden, it's all biblical. And all of a sudden, as a young Christian, I was seeing biblical prophecy being fulfilled before my eyes.
Yeah.
And for me, that was the hook that started it all off.
All off into Israel.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, I mentioned that you've done all these productions, but the ones specific to Israel, would you like to just give us an idea of some of them, just as an overview?
Well, the first 2 or 3 films I made on Israel, I was actually commissioned by David House Fellowship to do. Yeah. And I really believed at this time, although I was working in the general film and television industry at that point, mainly doing industrial films and TV commercials and that sort of thing. Anyway, they commissioned me to do a film called The Last Generation, And the Channel 9 network actually broadcast that on the
Wow.
30th anniversary of the State of Israel in 1978.
How amazing.
Yeah. So I've actually been working more like 50 plus years in film and television. So that was one of the starts. And then I did the original version of Jerusalem, the Covenant City. And of course, come the time of Oslo in the early 1990s, everything changed.
Yeah.
And I had a long gap when I didn't make any films about Israel at all through the late 80s, and it was in 1993 that the Lord really put on my heart to redo Jerusalem, the Covenant City. And Noreen and I had been living over in Perth in WA, and the Lord was calling us to go back to the UK for a season. It happened to be a 26-year season because it's so much nearer Israel.
Yes.
And I was, by necessity, in making the many films I've done on Israel, to travel there usually 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times in a year.
Which for our listeners, that's about a 4-hour plane journey compared to 24, 5 from
Yes.
Australia.
It's about the same distance as Perth to Sydney.
Yeah. So it's a much shorter journey than from Australia.
And cheaper too.
And much cheaper, yeah. Which is why, sadly, we don't get there as often as we'd like to. We're going to talk a little bit in greater detail about the newer ones that you've just done, but as we prepare ourselves for that, we're going to listen to our friend Karen Davis singing Israel, My Beloved. That's Karen Davis singing Israel, My Beloved, and my guest today is Hugh Kitson, and he's the filmmaker who's produced Whose Land? And Hugh, you seek to answer the question, do the Jewish people have a historic and legal right to the land? You answer the question, you assemble an amazing army of people, I think it is, of, we've got Richard Kemp who narrates it, the Colonel from England, but the array of international lawyers and diplomats and historians, it's amazing. Just organisationally, I think, what a job to pull all that together. But how did the project start?
Well, I was originally inspired to make it over 30 years ago. A very good friend of ours, Reverend Murray Dixon,
Yes,
from New Zealand, and
Murray,
he
yes.
founded Prayer for Israel over there, and later was rector at Christ Church in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was a long time friend of ours, and he wrote a book in 1990 called Whose Promised Land? And it was about the time of the first Iraq War, first Gulf War.
Yeah.
And it was actually just before that. And I read this book, and it was all about the foundation of the modern state of Israel from a historic point of view. Now, history is being constantly rewritten and revised.
Yeah.
And what the Lord laid on my heart was to actually tell it from a historical point of view, modern history in particular, rather than necessarily from the biblical promises of God.
Yeah.
I've made plenty of other films on that perspective anyway. And so that was when it was born, and I first wrote a treatment for that film in 1992, which was before the Oslo Accords.
Wow.
And I was finding even then, back then, that the history was being revised, the history of the modern state of Israel. What I basically didn't realise was the part that, at that time, was the part that international law played in the whole re-establishment of the state of Israel. I'd become aware of the fact that the Balfour Declaration was absolutely key. Now, the Balfour Declaration in itself, while it is a pledge that has very spiritual significance. I mean, God sees pledges like that from heaven.
Yeah.
And if we break them...
Yes, serious consequences.
Exactly. But in legal terms, actually, it was nothing more than a letter of intent, shall we put it that way.
Yeah.
While it carries a little bit of legal force, there's not an awful lot to it, because people often do act on a letter of intent. But the San Remo Conference and resolution, which happened in April 1920, and the date of the resolution itself was the 25th of April 1920.
Anzac Day.
Exactly. Exactly 5 years after the Gallipoli landings.
Yes.
That effectively raised the Balfour Declaration to the status of an international treaty, and it gained endorsement of all 51 nations of the newly formed League of Nations. And by the way, the League, I'm going to go backtrack to 1919, because something very significant happened in 1919. You had the Paris Peace Conference, which resulted in the Treaty of Versailles. But on the eve of the start of the Paris Peace Conference, Chaim Weizmann, who was the leader of the Jewish community
the
worldwide, met with Faisal Husseini, King Faisal or Emir Faisal, and they came to an agreement, a signed agreement. And if you watch the film, you'll actually see the agreement itself. And basically, they came to an agreement that there would be a Jewish homeland in what was then called Palestine. In other words, they were endorsing the Balfour Declaration.
Yeah.
And they even discussed borders. And the eastern border for the Jewish national home was actually going to be east of the Jordan River, but immediately west of the Hejaz railway line, which goes from Aleppo in the north through Damascus, through Amman and down to Mecca. And so there was going to be some Jewish land on the east side of the Jordan. At that stage, they hadn't, at the stage of the San Remo resolution, they hadn't drawn the eastern boundary of Palestine, although that later turned out to be a line that Sykes and Picot had come to when they were going to divvy up and create a French colony and a British colony in the former Ottoman Empire. So the Paris Peace Conference, their claims were presented to the Paris Peace Conference, and they were totally in line with each other, the Arabs and the Jews at that time. And the other thing is, because today Israel is often branded as a colonialist establishment. Well, it's anything but.
Yes, exactly.
And had the Sykes-Picot Agreement become the international law norm or recognised norm, there would have been a British colony and a French colony.
That's right,
there. And Woodrow Wilson, the American president, he wanted to end the colonial era because prior to the First World War, whenever someone conquered someone else's land, they annexed it and claimed sovereignty, and that sovereignty was recognised. He wanted to end that, and that any land that was conquered the indigenous population would be given self-determination, and when they were ready for it, self-governance. And this is how the mandate system started. Now, the mandate for Palestine, which came out of the San Remo Conference, the mandate for Palestine was unique in that it recognized the historic connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. So in other words, the Jewish people were recognized, even though they weren't resident there. Nearly all of them, not quite all of them, but nearly all of them had been expelled by the Romans 1900 years later.
Yeah.
They were recognized as the indigenous people of the land, even though most of them were outside the territory. And shall we say, the introduction to the mandate actually says that, and it gave the Jewish people the right to reconstitute their homeland.
Yeah.
And that word reconstitute is absolutely vital. So that was in the preamble. That was the word I was looking for to the mandate. So that became part of international law. Now, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, because when the UN was formed after the Second World War, took over from the League of Nations, Article 80 of the UN Charter, its founding charter, which again is an international treaty binding in international law, the rights of the beneficiaries of the mandates, whether it's Palestine or a mandate in Africa or even Latin America, that they weren't just those 4 or 5 mandates in the Middle East, they were around the world. The rights that were given to the beneficiaries of those mandates are enshrined in Article 80 of the UN Charter. So the right of the Jewish people to reconstitute their homeland, of which Judea and Samaria, today known as the West Bank, is incorporated in that. And history does clearly show us that the kingdom of Israel, as it existed nearly 3,000 years ago, was based in Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem, even though the inheritance of the 12 tribes of Jacob went far beyond that.
It's interesting that you raise the issue of the rewriting of history, which we hear in the mainstream all the time. They're not rewriting it to correct it. They're trying to downplay, to misconstrue it, isn't it? That's
absolutely
really what's happening, to de-legitimise Israel. So having lawyers who know their stuff internationally is really important.
Absolutely.
So how did you get them all together? Because you've got some amazing people.
Well, I have to say, with God's help, very much so, because this happens when I make films about Israel. The Lord intervenes and helps me along. But I knew 1 or 2 lawyers and came across them, and basically I didn't really have to go searching for them. I was introduced to them one after the other. And I've met many international lawyers. And one of the key ones is a man called Andrew Tucker.
Yes, Australian guy.
Yeah, and Andrew's been a friend of mine for over 20 years, and we've worked together on projects every now and then. He comes from Melbourne originally, and he was one of my key advisors, I would say key advisor.
Okay.
And he's written a book called Israel on Trial, which he co-wrote with Matthews Dubois. He's a Dutchman, and by the way, Andrew is based in Holland.
So I thought so. In that, what's the court there that he does a lot of work on?
Well, he does liaise with the International Court of Justice and also the International Criminal Court. And back in 2016-17, which is when we're filming part 1, he established an organisation called the Hague Initiation for International Cooperation, THINK. And they held a conference in 2017, just as we were finishing off part 1 of Whose Land. And I met quite a number of the lawyers
Oh, at that point,
At that point, including Natasha Hausdorff, who's become very well known.
And she's on Sky News and so forth, and really putting the case forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, she's also become a good friend of mine over the years.
Yeah. But it's important, though, because if the legality's there, I mean, people are talking as if it's legal, the things they're saying, like the occupation and all these words, but they're not accurate words.
Not at all. The occupied Palestinian territories, that term, occupied Palestinian territories, one of the lawyers in the film actually describes it as lingua franca. In other words, it's just parlance. And that same lawyer said there has never been a binding international treaty or agreement, not even Oslo, by the way, although Oslo could have resulted in a Palestinian state. The final status was never agreed upon and signed. That would have then been an international treaty. It's based on parlance coming out of the United Nations and all of these UN resolutions. And this is another misconception. Many people think the United Nations is a legislative body. It's actually nothing of the sort.
Yeah.
It's a political body, and it reflects the opinions of the majority. These resolutions reflect the opinion of the majority of the people who vote on these resolutions. But certainly in the General Assembly, there is no legal binding of it. And I want to come back to that in a moment.
Maybe after the...
because that's quite important.
Yeah.
The only time when a UN resolution is binding is a Chapter 7 resolution in the UN Security Council. The vast majority of resolutions are not Chapter 7, they're Chapter 6.
Which is in our news all the time at the moment with what our government wants to do in recognising a Palestinian state, which we'll come back to talk on these subjects with Hugh in a moment. We're going to listen to Rachel and Avner Bosky singing Save Your People. It's Rachel and Avner Bosky singing Save Your People. My guest today is Hugh Kitson, a filmmaker of Whose Land, and we're just talking about the UN Resolution 181. You were just about to tell us that, so fill us in on how that fits with things happening today.
Well, it's often thought that a Palestinian state should be established along the lines of more or less the armistice lines. I'll come to that in a minute. But the important thing about Resolution 181, and we mentioned this just before we went to this lovely break with Avner and Rachel Bosky, it's not binding in international law. General Assembly resolutions are not actually binding. And so because the Arabs collectively rejected Resolution 181, including the Arabs resident in Palestine, who are today called the Palestinians. They weren't called that in those days.
No, that's a whole other subject.
Basically, they rejected Resolution 181, and as a result of that, it more or less became null and void. And the provisions of Resolution 181 became null and void, which included the internationalization of Jerusalem. And the foundation of the modern state of Israel, even though the Independence Declaration talks about Resolution 181, and yes, there was a vote, the foundation, legal foundation of the state of Israel is not Resolution 181. It's actually the San Remo Resolution
from
and the mandate. And the mandate actually doesn't even mention the Arabs. It talks about the non-Jewish population having their civil and religious rights safeguarded. They didn't have any political rights according to the mandate.
Wow.
Not at all. Now, coming back to Resolution 181, had the Arabs accepted it, and the Jews, both of them, both parties accepted it, then an agreement would have been made between them, a treaty signed, and that would have been binding in international law. That didn't happen. And the only state that was formed as a result of Resolution 181 was the State of Israel. Now that brings us to another thing. On the 14th of May 1948, Israel declared independence.
That's right.
Recognized in international law, or a fact in international law, even if it wasn't universally recognized. The Arab states invaded the very next day with the idea of annihilating the infant state of Israel. That invasion and the subsequent annexation by Egypt and Jordan of Gaza and Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem, respectively, the Jordanians, the word or term West Bank comes from Jordan. That annexation, occupation, was illegal in international law, just as the Russian invasion of parts of Ukraine and annexation is illegal in international law. And the Jordanian invasion and the Egyptians was no less legal than, or illegal, I should say, than the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So, very interesting principle of international law, which we talk about in part 2 of Whose Land. And this is a universal principle of international law. When the Soviet Union broke up, for instance, the former Soviet republics that became independent nations, those independent nations inherited the borders that they had previously had. The principle is called uti possidetis juris, and it's universal whenever a new nation is formed. All of the other mandates, the independent nations inherited the borders. And so Israel, according to international law, inherited the borders of what had been the British mandate, with the Jordan River on the east side, Mediterranean on the west side. So according to international law, as of the 14th of May 1948, that territory, including Judea, Samaria, and all of Jerusalem, was part of the sovereign state of Israel. So that's one aspect. And as I mentioned, the Resolution 181 effectively became null and void because of the Arab rejection. So there is no legal basis today for a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria.
So there's a big push, even from Australia, at the moment. You've just written an article, which was to be published in The Spectator, I understand, and you said about the dangers of a Palestinian state. What are those dangers that you see? Apart from the legalities?
Well, apart from the legalities, we need to go back to Oslo, because the PLO, which was founded as a terrorist organization, was recognized as the sole representative of the Palestinian people. Well, the PLO was in exile. There were Palestinians, or there were Arabs living in Judea and Samaria who were nothing to do with the PLO. And all of a sudden you had these guys coming in from Tunisia and wherever. And they became the Palestinian Authority. And you had the Oslo Accords, which I think were very ill thought out and ill-timed, quite apart from the fact that Leviticus 25:23 forbids Israel from trading land for any reason, including peace. And these people were imposed on the people we now know as the Palestinians. Well, you had a terrorist organization in charge of them. They said they'd give up terrorism. They never did.
No.
And the PLO Charter, by the way, as much as the Hamas Charter is well known for calling for the eradication of the state of Israel and the mass murder of Jews. And of course, on October the 7th, 2023, that's what Hamas embarked on.
Yeah.
Now, the PLO Charter also has a clause eradicating Zionism from the land that they call from the river to the sea, in other words, the Jordan River to the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And so Zionism has to be eradicated according to the PLO Charter. And the phrase that we hear all the time, marches, probably there's one going on in Melbourne and Sydney as we speak, comes that chant, Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, or it's the other way around, from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. It's straight out of the PLO Charter.
Yeah.
And what it means is the eradication of the Jewish state.
Yeah.
And so this is what's being chanted all over our streets. And I have to say, it's nothing short of hate speech.
Correct.
Against Jews.
Yeah.
So, and this is what the Australian government is now signing up to. The Hamas is still holding about 50 hostages. We don't know how many are still alive, 20. And yet the Albanese government is actually rewarding Hamas and the Palestinians
for their
terrorism. And by the way, 70% of the Arabs living in Judea, Samaria, called Palestinians, they supported what Hamas did on the 7th of October. And if there was an election in Judea and Samaria, and there hasn't been for 20 years, so Mahmoud Abbas is in the fourth year of his first term. Sorry, it was a 4-year term, and he's now in the 20th
year of his
first term. So it's just a nonsense. And, you know, in this article I've just written, I quoted a piece from an international lawyer called Douglas Feith, who I've not met, but Natasha Hausdorff was interviewing him. And he said, basically, these politicians who are recognizing a Palestinian state are, in the name of international law, they're ignoring international law.
Just the irony.
Yes.
Such an irony. Amazing. We're going to take a break now and listen to Marty Goetz singing For Zion's Sake. He's singing Isaiah chapter 62. The beautiful voice of Marty Goetz singing For Zion's Sake. And we're very blessed today to have filmmaker Hugh Kitson with us in studio. And it's been a delightful chatting to you. Now, Hugh, in all the things that we've chatted about, I think about Isaiah prophesied and John the Baptist fulfilled the saying, prepare the way for the Lord. How do you see all of these events, what you've filmed and documented, coming into that criteria, preparing the way of the Lord?
Well, I do believe that we're doing that. A lot of people, Christians including, and also our Jewish friends, don't really realize that the current conflict in the Middle East is actually around, we would say, the return of the Messiah. With our Jewish friends, they believe the coming of the Mashiach.
Yeah.
And many Orthodox Jews do believe, and their hope is in the coming of the Mashiach. Now, one of the prerequisites for the coming of the Messiah is the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel.
Yeah.
And this is one of the tremendous miracles that we're seeing before our eyes.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't understand that there is spiritual opposition to that.
Yes. Yeah.
And really anti-Semitism, as we call it, hatred of the Jews, which goes back to the time of the pharaohs, is all about hatred of the Jewish people. And why are the Jewish people hatred? The simple fact is, and if you look at Isaiah 19, chapter 19, verses 5 and 6, you will see that effectively what God has done, he's called the sons of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob to be his representative nation on the earth.
Yeah.
Now, in order for Mashiach to come, Israel has to be back in the land.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we believe that Mashiach is Yeshua. That's his Hebrew name. It means salvation. And he's not returning to Al-Quds, that's the Arabic name for Jerusalem, as the capital of an Islamic Palestinian state.
Yep.
And the satanic opposition to the regathering of the Jewish people to their land. And that is what the conflict is all about. And the nations of the world, sadly including our Australian government, are trying to, if I can put it this way, disinherit the Jewish people of the land that God gave to them through Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, and particularly the capital, Jerusalem.
Yep.
And so we're seeing these United Nations resolutions, and this conflict is spoken about in the Tanakh, particularly in the book of Zechariah, also Daniel, and in the New Testament in the book of Revelation. So we can expect this. But one thing I do want to emphasize to any Jewish friend who might be listening to this is that God has promised that Israel will never be destroyed.
Yes.
Effectively, Israel's enemies will have to dethrone God first.
Yes.
And that's simply not going to happen. And really, for our Jewish friends, the safest place for them to be is in Israel.
Yeah. Because his word is forever.
Yeah, right.
His word is forever and his promise is there. And it's all through the word. And so for our Christian friends, it's really important to know what the Word of God says about this. And for churches that are like, yes, return of Jesus, clap, clap, but there's a lot of... And the other thing, what you're saying there, outside the Eastern Gate, where they believe the Messiah is coming there, is a cemetery. And they believe that will stop him from coming. And we know that's not going to stop him from coming either. So there's many attempts to stop him from coming, and I think that's a really powerful point. Messiah is not returning to a Palestinian state. He's returning to the Jewish state.
Yeah.
And that's the real critical thing. Hugh, thank you so much for making the films. That's just the really important thing. But thank you for coming and sharing this with us. So where can people find your website and your YouTube, and how can they get hold of these documentaries that you've made? Okay,
our website for Whose Land is www.whoseland.info, and you can live stream for a small fee. I think it's about $3.50, something like that. You can live stream the 2 feature-length documentaries of part 1, which is called Foundations, goes up to 1948, and part 2, which is called The Law of Occupation and the Status of Jerusalem. And That's part 2, which we released last year. And they're both not quite 2 hours long, but you can watch them, or you can watch them in shorter episodes between the 2 parts. There's 19 episodes ranging in 9 to 13 minutes in length, roughly. And if you go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@whosland, you can watch the 19 episodes, or you can watch a trailer or whatever on our YouTube channel.
So people can access those, and I really recommend they do, because, as we said, you've got these international lawyers giving the information, so people could go, whoa, when they hear things on the news or the politicians speaking, you can go back and go, no, actually, this is international law, and be settled in themselves what it is, which is important for those that are praying, important for those that are involved in contacting politicians, whatever it is that your involvement is in this area, so that you've got the facts. And this is really collecting the facts, isn't it?
It's absolutely true. And I believe it's vital for Jewish people to look at this, so that they can take their own stand. By the way, there is a term that's commonly used for trying to turn international law on its head, which all of this is doing. It's called lawfare.
Yes, yes.
So you've got 2 things happening, the rewriting of history and lawfare.
Yeah, yes. And the thing is, we have the Word of God, which is the total law that we stand on, which is written in heaven forever, and that's the blessing of that. So, look, we're just so blessed by what you've done and for sharing it with us. And I just encourage our listeners to pursue it further and to make sure that you get a copy and that you can really listen to it. So we're going to go out today with listening to Paul Wilbur singing Shalom Jerusalem. That's Paul Wilbur singing Shalom Jerusalem, and I just encourage you as we go out today, as we've been listening to Hugh Kitson, the importance of praying for the peace of Jerusalem. The Psalms tell us that we need to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We see what's happening there, and we really need to pray for it, because it is a battle for Jerusalem, for the Temple Mount, and for what the Lord's purposes in the return of Messiah. And so pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and the Lord will bless you.